Today we're joined for a very amazing conversation on creative arts and fintechs by three amazing personalities. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies first, Madame Juliet Nana Yaa Asantewaa is a filmmaker and CEO of the National Film Authority, convener of the Africa Cinema Summit, the first gathering of all Africa and cinema, of all Africa film, and cinema stakeholders, and the past board chair of NAFTI. Please make her welcome with a round of applause. I give to you a poet, a playwright, and creator of the Mansa world. It's an ambitious project to create one of Africa's biggest cultural products for the global market. Recently, they took a team of 60 to Paris to launch the project at the UNESCO headquarters with a powerful theatrical performance on Mansa Musa. Ladies and gentlemen, he's yours, Chief Moomen. And now, ladies and gentlemen, live and in living color, he is a Ghanaian, African, and international superstar, entrepreneur, and a respected voice. Most of you don't know that. On youth empowerment, financial and digital banking, and a driver of Africa's creative economy. Put your hands together for the one, the only, Michael Owusu Addo, the man Sarkodie. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me for this very stimulating conversation. I just want to ask, is there a correlation between creative arts and fintech? Well, we shall come to that shortly, but let me just build a little foundation. I don't want to take much of your time. I want us to have a very short conversation with border on a few themes. We're talking about financial inclusion. We're talking about funding and investment, royalties and intellectual property management, marketplace platforms, risk management, and overall, how creative art policy and fintech converge. I'm going to ask three questions that really speak to these themes. Ladies and gentlemen, recently, we all saw Idris Elba and quite some amazing players from the Stellar Network Group who visited the Bank of Ghana. And amongst many other things, they talked about how the creative talent and ecosystem are not benefiting from intellectual property as they should, particularly when it's used internationally. And they have the challenge of struggling to receive payments in a seamless manner, which is contributing to factors inhibiting the growth, progress, and the commercial success of the creative sector in general. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to ask, what is the current state of the creative landscape in Ghana, and how does it really converge with fintech? I'm going to ask you about the challenges that are being encountered when it comes to the creative arts and fintech, but most importantly, how we can solve these challenges. Let me start with you, Madame Yaa Asantewaa. Give us an overview of how the landscape looks like, particularly when it comes to leveraging fintech and the creative arts.
Wow. First of all, let me say good evening, everyone. Let me say that it's exciting as a creative, but also as a business person. I've done this for quite a bit. To be at a gathering of bankers and, where conversations about fintech is happening, because even though there's such a synergy, most of the times, that understanding is not there. In fact, just about 2 weeks ago, I was having a conversation with a bank, and the point came up that the creative space is not, is not tangible. I think there's a little bit of a break. Which is sad when that happens, because I would just backtrack and give some numbers. And also, when you talk about the creative space, people usually think about the talent, but this is a business down the value chain. I mean, you're talking about the creative person who is making the product, but then you're also talking about the marketing, the distribution, you're talking about the marketplace and all of that, but usually we forget all of those. And so creative people find it difficult assessing funding or having conversations with banks and financial institutions because that understanding is not there. And so opportunities like this help us close that gap. And I usually will jump at any opportunity like this to express and just, share knowledge because it's important. And so in the interest of sharing knowledge, I'll just share some numbers. So, for instance, the UN, UNESCO says that the creative space is the largest employer on the continent. That's one. But beyond that, this is a space, the creative space is right now contributing over 5 billion, but the potential is 20 billion. And then you can ask yourself, what are the opportunities of that for Ghana or for Africa or for any bank or for any fintech company? But even when we talk about creative space, this number that I've given you, you can sometimes, I think the report focused a little bit on the film sector. And so I'll open it up. When you open it up to include the entire creative space, you're talking about over 300 billion. And usually when we have that conversation, it doesn't even cover the gaming space. And the gaming space, again, globally is over 300 billion. And if you take the gaming space, for instance, in Africa, Ghana is the second largest gaming market on the continent. And just 2 or 3 years ago, Ghanaians spent over $60 million downloading mobile games. And so if you're looking at these opportunities and you're looking down the value chain of the creative space, be it that designer that is creating the costume, the filmmaker that is working on the film, the musician that is putting together their piece, and my colleagues will go more into that. There's always opportunity not only for assessing funds, but for using technology. And so I think that I'll cut it short and I'll say that whatever gaps there are, I will not spend tonight going into those gaps because we all know it, and everyone here, in fact, I've heard in many times that when financial people are meeting, they think that creative people do not have a place there, and I think that's a big, big gap. And so opportunities like this to close those gaps, open up opportunities and have access, give access to creative people. And, you know, last year we just had a little conversation at the Africa Cinema Summit, and one of the things we said was, where would you rather be? We said this to the cinema world. Where would you rather be than where your biggest opportunity is? And so I would throw a challenge out there to this space and say, perhaps by not looking at the creative space and all the opportunities therein, you would lose or you're losing. And so where would you rather be, or where would you rather be looking than where your biggest opportunity could be? Thank you.
Where would you rather be than where your biggest opportunity could be? You've articulated so well on the lack of understanding of the ecosystem by players and even the lack of understanding of the power of fintech and technology in general. We're joined by Kofi Okyere Darko, legend, convener of what has been described as Africa's largest cultural expose. I'm talking about Rhythms on the Runway. Please show him some love. Yodi, we're talking about the digital and creative landscape. Give us an overview of your understanding of the landscape and some of the challenges bedeviling it.
1 2 1 2. Is my mic working? Well, let me take this. First of all, let me say good evening to all of you. Thank you very much indeed for coming out. When I got a call to have a conversation about the creative space and fintech, I got flashbacks. I find myself in that space between the mid-1990s through till now in the creative space in terms of music production and also being in the media space. Now, one of the things we did before the turn of the last millennium, around from 1995 thereabout to about 2025 was when someone like Sarkodie released an album, what we'll do is we had quite a number of music producers or distributors, as they were, who would pre-finance what you did or would put your music out in the public domain. They would be in charge of what happened in terms of promotions and what have you. So in terms of fintech, Charlie, we didn't deal much with that space. And I retired from producing music in, I think my last album was Wute's Kotosa, because it was at the point when people were putting their music on social media and saying, oh, Charlie, go and download for free. It did not make sense to me. You know, I came from that era where I would be paid up front, maybe in today's figures, maybe some 500,000 Ghana cedis, yeah, or to 1 million Ghana cedis up front before your music is even put out in the public domain. And then all of a sudden they're saying, Charlie, put your music out on Facebook, download for free. So I sat back thinking about my cost of going to the studio, cost of paying the producers, cost of paying my musicians as well. And then people would just, download for free? It did not make sense to me. So I said to myself, Charlie, this is when you take a walk from the industry. What I did, or what I failed to do as an individual was actually to get to know what was new on the market. You know, how else were people making money? So when I woke up, Sarkodie and the rest of them were way gone, ahead of the rest of us. And then being someone who is a 360 creative person, I also had a baby that I was nurturing, 1957, my clothing brand. And in that space, of course, we've gone beyond selling in Ghana to the rest of the world. And what we do is, obviously, you put your clothes out on your social media platforms, on your website, and everywhere people find themselves in the world, they can actually buy from Ghana. Now, obviously, we don't do this as a company alone. We work through the banks as well. But where we also don't smile is we find out in our minds, we think, and quite a number of creatives feel that way, that people in the banking sector don't understand what we do. The only time we get invited to the table is when maybe there's an annual end-of-year party and someone like Sarkodie needs to perform, or they are calling a Kofi Okyere Darko to get on the mic as an MC. When we put out our proposals to companies like yours, it's difficult for you to appreciate what we're doing, and you ask yourself, Charlie, about concert here, how do we really benefit? So on a platform like this, it's very important to us, as creatives, to be invited to this event where we see how we can actually bridge the gap and actually see the way forward. So personally, I'm very honored to be here, and I think that once again, you should put your hands together for the conveners of this evening's event.
Lovely, lovely. Now you have actually laid the foundation for the legend, Sarkodie, who really has seen the transition from the analog to the digital. Rapini, I beg you, tell us, what's been your experience? What are the challenges right now?
Thank you so much. I'll start off by saying that we actually are in a beautiful time as far as the creative art is concerned. So obviously the problem is it's a sector that is untapped yet. So now that's where we look at it. But that's also a very good news for us because now it's a new fertile land where we can actually put a lot into it. And as my brother was saying, is not because I'm an artist, but music industry is one of the best industries anybody can invest in. Because this is when you have a product where you don't have to pay people to keep it on a shelf or open a store with the lights on to pay ECG, right? It's literally in the air, but then you're making money for the rest of your life. So with Africa being the new cool, as far as music is concerned, not because I'm here, but Afrobeat is literally the biggest genre worldwide. But who is missing out is the people actually making the music and where the music came from. And that part is why we are here today. And but I'll go back to say it's actually a beautiful time because this is an opportunity for investors and people that actually want to make an impact and also get something back out of it to jump into it. So for me personally, not to sit here and brag, but as an artist, I can choose not to record music, but I want to record because I make money monthly from music. But what hurts the most is I normally get my money from people in the diaspora because that structure has been built for them to be able to access and pay. So the opportunity here is how do we get our biggest fan base to patronize so we can make something out of it and then also keep the money in-house. I'm talking about Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, because we're taking the money, we're shipping the money all the way back to the people who did not play a role in making this wave called Afrobeat. So it's a beautiful time to me, but I think it's just about having the right conversations and also talking to the right people who can understand this language and come in and then we solve it. But it's a beautiful space that anybody who wants to make an impact, also make money, one sector that you can go to. I think my sister rounded everything up for the creative arts, but I'm speaking as a musician and what I face on a day-to-day. I was telling somebody right here, we're having a conversation. I said, some big chunk of money can be, oh, Sarkodie is the face of this bank, or you did a show and I was paid. but the money that's so consistent. And anybody who has dealt with money knows that the consistent money is what we call money. The money that I sleep and just wake up and check account and it's in. Because I don't know if you guys know, the more you guys are having fun and enjoying at the parties, I get paid. So if you don't like Sarkodie, you don't want me to get rich, stop listening to the music, don't dance to it. But yeah, that's how beautiful this industry is. The people are having fun, but then we can make money out of it. But we haven't found a way to monetize it from where it's from. You know, so the overview, I would say, is a beautiful time because we are out there, we're making an impact, but it's just we have to run with the wave. We have to join the wave so we don't miss out for other people to enjoy something that we have built. So basically, I think that's why when we were called, we didn't hesitate to come here because it's about time. I've been doing it for a while. My high at this point is not having the biggest record or selling out a concert because is definitely going to happen. So that is not what moves me, but it's about going beyond that and fixing the problems of how our legends and we coming up can monetize what we are having. And this is where the FinTech comes in. And I'm looking forward for people like us who have been doing it for a while, who are building systems behind to have these people on this other side where we can merge and make something magical and get people to pay for entertainment. Because it's not just, because it's entertainment doesn't mean it's just entertainment. You know, it's really, it's a big business that people are missing out. But it's a great time too because this is a time to get in and make money.
Sakib Nazir, please, a round of applause. Sakib Nazir, speaking on investment in fintech, mentioned capacity building as a big enabler. I'll come to that shortly as you tell us all the structures you've put in place to also harness the power of technology using fintechs. But let me come to you, Chief Moomen. Chief Moomen, you have done, amazingly well in your area. Tell us about the evolution of the creative sector and how it marries with fintech and technology.
Thank you very much. So far as we're concerned, we are now actually coming to do well. So we are still warming up. We all know that Africa's youth population is growing. We also know that Africa's middle class is expanding, and so once there's an expanding middle class, there's more disposable income for people to invest, you know, in places like entertainment and all of that. So the question is, where will the bulk of that investment from Africa's middle class or the African population go? Would it go into consuming our own cultural product or consuming international cultural products? We all know that the world is a global village, so we have access to information. We can use the streaming sites to watch movies, to listen to music, you know. There are all kinds of other restaurants in town. We see marketing of all big fashion brands. And so our tastes are being accustomed to some of these global brands. What that means is that if we do not invest in elevating our own brands, at the end of the day, not only would we lose out on the international market, we're going to lose out on our own market. So for example, I'm in theater, right? If a Cirque du Soleil, for example, or a Lion King, for example, came to Accra to do a production and they were charging $100, trust me, people will pay $100 to go and see them. In fact, when some of you travel outside Ghana and you go to Broadway and you go to West End, you pay top dollar to go and see these productions. But when you come to Ghana and we say pay 500 Ghana cedis, you are going to scream. Well, because there's a reason, right? That production that you are watching at Broadway or West End is probably costing $20, $30 to $50 million to produce. The amount of quality, the amount of spectacle that they can curate will not match to what we produce here with our 100,000, 200,000 Ghana cedis. And because you are already exposed to the premium of art, you know, you will not see the value in spending more money. So it is now more important than ever to actually create the right cultural product from Africa by seeking the right investment. So my ambition and my team has, for the last 6 years, since 2018, has been, one, to create $1 billion cultural and entertainment product out of African culture and heritage, starting with theater. And why not? Others have done it. Lion King, which is an African aesthetic in terms of the cultural curation, has sold over 100 million tickets and is approaching, you know, over $10 billion in the box office, right? So if others can derive such economic value out of our own cultural aesthetic, how about us, the custodians? So we've been pitching the Mansa World Theatre production as an opportunity to present a compelling compelling African theatrical epic on the global stage for Africans and for the world that can command a certain premium. And to do that, the difference between us and them is the investment barrier. So the biggest question we've always faced is that, would we find an African brand or African investors who will be confident enough to put, say, a $10 million in an African cultural product in a market that even has not, that doesn't even attract $100,000 for theater, right? Or would we find those investors, out of Africa? We spent a lot of years focusing on trying to get African investors because we said, what is the point in taking an African cultural epic, African history and heritage on an international exhibition when we can't even find the barest investment here in our part of the world. So we spent a lot of time to try and get at least our pre-seed capital from Africa, and we are now going international, to get the sponsorship. What I think may happen is that the bulk investment that we need to curate that content will come from abroad. And what that means is that the bulk revenue and the bulk profit will stay there, but some of it will come. But then what we would achieve is a model, and that's why I'm talking to you bankers, because you want an example. You want a model that works. Our industry seems opaque and vague to you. So I've always told my local investors that when the Mansa World succeeds, someone can point to a Chief Moomen and the Bamboo Heritage Production and says, these guys are bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. If they can do it, we can do it. And then we're going to experience the domino effect. So for me, I'm very excited that we are platforming this conversation. And I'm also throwing a challenge out to you that there are great productions, there are great ideas, there's great creativity on the African continent, and it's the new area. Africa will not compete with China when it comes to manufacturing anytime soon. We will not compete with Germany when it comes to engineering anytime soon. We may not compete with Silicon Valley when it comes to productivity in the IT industry anytime soon. So the lowest hanging fruit currently is the culture and the art that we have, the fashion, the music, and we're already seeing it. All that is left is to accelerate. And to accelerate, we need that investment, we need the structures, we need the digital platforms, and now payment platforms are being made easy. One of the things I heard from my friends is that paying for things abroad from Ghana can be very difficult, especially in a market where we don't have PayPal and all of that. So one of the lowest hanging fruits also for those of you in policy is to see how easy it is for Africans or those of us in Ghana to pay for services abroad and to receive payment, in our part of the world to accelerate the industry. But I can assure you, between myself, Juliet, Sarkodie, KOD, we are going to create billion-dollar industries. And the question is, are you getting on board now, or you come when we now have the leverage and then you get a little bit of the pie? Thank you.
Now, to add something to what Chief was saying, sometimes you wonder if it's because people in the financial institutions don't have an understanding. It's unfortunate we don't have someone to actually respond to some of our questions right now.
They are here.
Yeah, well, they are, but they can't, respond when we ask in real time. Because I'm sure for all of you, you have your entertainments at home. You're not always talking numbers and finance, But what do we get wrong? Sometimes we want to understand it from our standpoint. When we send you our proposals and we see other corporate organizations or other people in the financial institutions in maybe Nigeria or South Africa sponsoring and supporting what we do. But then back home in Ghana, it's really such a tough nut to actually crack into the banking sector. So for us, it's really an honor to be here this evening, and we really want to get responses from you. It's an honor for us to be here because this is something we've been looking forward to for a long time.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for walking us through the evolution, spelling out, the various stages from talent to production to management to distribution and all that. You've articulated so well on financing, which brings me to 2 points I want us to speak about. Let's talk about funding and investment, and then let's talk about royalties and intellectual properties. KOD, you talk about sponsorships and all that. Yeah, I know a lot of the creative sector really depends on sponsorship.
That's right.
Let me give you some good news. FinTech can play a role in providing funding and investment opportunities for creative arts projects and initiatives. Talk about platforms that specialize in crowdfunding. You know of crowdfunding. And other alternative financing methods which can help artists and creative entrepreneurs raise capital for their ventures. King Sak, give us a practical example of how some FinTech tools have aided you to really obtain financing other than, reversing or going back to the traditional financing sources such as banks and other banking institutions?
For me, as an independent artist, I solely depend on getting funding to make my music because it's very tough. I don't have a label. I've been funding myself since So sometimes I get an upfront my sales that I've been making to be able to make the product, and when I make it back, then now I can get back to receiving my revenues. So doing distribution, that's what I did for the past 3-4 years for my last projects. I work with platforms that distribute my music, but then they have the capital to give the money upfront for me to do the project. Then when it's done, they recoup, and then I can make my money after that. And it's been very smooth. I don't have to go into my pocket all the time. But as he said, we always have to look outside to do these things. Like I have to go and sit in London. I always have to travel and sit with these people, go to America. But then it's been very difficult out here in Ghana. But then it's a very good opportunity. As I said, we are talking about serious numbers here. So that has been my model over the years. And I think a few independent artists has been doing that. But as I said, it's a great virgin platform where a sector where it's not tapped. So the right people here, and then we sit in here. It's just a conversation. As my brother said, my brother just articulated everything that has to happen. So I think moving forward, all these things that we've been going outside to get anyways, we have to make sure that we get it in here in Ghana, Nigeria. We can keep the money running here. But that's what I've been doing over the years. Just going to get money to pre-finance my work. And then also there's been a platform, Mariam, I don't know if we can talk about it, but there's a platform here in Africa that does that as well. They can fund your project, and then they can recoup and you make your money back. So there's been help from fintech companies, but the main issue at this point, it's not an issue. I always want to run away from it being an issue. It's a beautiful thing because it's a virgin state where we can actually create some innovative things. So now we need these funding that can come the same way we're going to the people outside. We need to keep it in-house, and that's going to be the innovative way to do it now.
King Sak, let me pin you on royalties.
Yeah.
What's been the challenge so far, and how have fintech solutions come to your aid?
So that's what I said in the beginning, that the main reason why I'm sitting here is because of royalties, and not necessarily, I'm somebody that I panic before something happened. You know, so when I had my first record in Ghana, which was the biggest hit, instead of me enjoying the moment, I was panicking because I was thinking about how to top that. So naturally, that's how I am as a person. So I'm not there yet. I'm not old. I'm still getting paid. But you never know. It's just a matter of time. So I'm panicking now, trying to solve it. So the royalty system has been a big issue here in Ghana, but it's it's something so little to do. It's not that hard. It's just putting the system in place and just getting the money back. You know, we have our people here playing the music. If there was a system in here where they had to log in for everything they're playing here, they play 2 of my songs. That's, let's say 2 CDs. 2 CDs each is 4. So just this evening, I made 4 CDs. And how many events are they having in a week? Parties, naming ceremonies, funerals. We can get paid every second.
What I want to know is, the platforms that you deal with so far,
Yes.
are they fair in their distribution?
That's a business model. So it will be, at this point, because we don't have an option, you deal with what you have.
Okay.
You know, so you would wish you can have a good, fair share. But I think some platforms do a good share. Okay. I can give it up to like an Apple. Okay. They give you a good share. There's some split, but I think it's just business model. It would be better that I can make a 50% off something than making nothing. Right? So we don't have that model to even think about even if it's fair or not. I think we can cross that road when we get there. But at this point, what we're looking at is to start to have something that can just get the money back for this art that we put out for people to enjoy.
In your estimation, is there a tracking system that we can put in place?
Yes. So that's what I meant by there should be a tracking system for any outlet that uses music or movies. My sister will deal with movies because I don't know how that works, but I can talk about music. So there should be that tracking system where on a daily basis, anywhere the music is being used, it has to be paid for. Talking about radio, talking about parties. Every DJ needs that tracking system to be able to play. You know, and it's possible to do that. Just that we haven't been able to have somebody understand that language and willing to be a part of. But I think from tonight, it's going to be possible from the conversations we're having. But yes, we need a tracking system.
There's a man called Mr. Patrick Quanson who actually comes in very handy, talking about necessity to create access and collaboration. Perhaps he may come to the rescue. Let me come to you, Nana Yaa, on the same tangent. Funding, financing. Let's talk about copyright also. How has FinTech enabled your sector?
Right. So Ghana is behind a bit, but the rest of the world has been running for a long time. And when you talk about FinTech, for instance, I've had a movie on Amazon Prime since 2016. and I'm paid every 3 months. And how does that work? One may say it's fintech, it's a business. And we know Amazon is one of the most successful marketplace, not just for products, but for film and music and all of those. And so they've found a way to deliver value. My copyright is protected, my distributor, they have aggregators. So it's a model that is in place that we can easily copy. Now, when we are talking about the sector, again, to come back to the point, we usually just think of the creative rather than the business that surrounds the creative. And usually, SAC manages his own label, but usually there's an entire, if there's a label or there's, someone was, if he wasn't managing his own label, there will be an entire team behind him from when he comes up with the idea to the marketing of it, to the distributing of it, to the marketplace. And even when you come to film, if you go to the marketplace, you're talking about VOD, that's video on demand. I just gave an example. You're talking about television, you're talking about airlines, you're talking about cinemas. When you go into the cinema, for instance, you're talking about ticketing, so the opportunities for technology is endless. And the opportunities for making money in those spaces are endless. And yet still, when you go to the bank, they will tell you it's intangible. And I really do not understand that. But there are some banks that are getting a lot of clarity. For instance, if we don't know, Afri-Exim Bank just announced a fund for the creative space. And guess what? Afri-Exim Bank, for instance, is investing in IPs. So that's part of, that's a model they've come up because they're looking towards the future and they know that's where the money is going to be. And so Afri-Exim Bank, if I come up with an IP in a few years, they'll buy the IP off me. And it's a pure, business transaction. I know there are some banks in Ghana already that are getting into that space. I think there are a couple of them here. I don't know, they might be creating their own content. But even, just before the COVID and after that, and let me just give you this fun fact. During the COVID period, the creative sector was the highest paid or the highest paying in the US, for instance, above telecoms and oil. And that's why they call the creative space the new oil. And so salaries in the creative space in the US, for instance, was 45% higher than any other sector. When you speak about the space, like Sak was talking about, the person who consumes his content, let's take a step back and divide it into two. There's the creator of the content, and then there's the consumer of the content. And in both places, there's opportunities for business. And so, again, to the point, whether you want to go the route of Afri-Exim Bank where you are buying IPs, whether you want to go into the space of giving funding, like, if you go to just Nigeria, they have the Afri-Exim Bank, they have the Bank of Industry, Access, Nollywood Fund. There's all of these funding opportunities. And so if I'm a creative, no banker will sit in front of me and tell me that my product is intangible. Because the money is right there. Show me the money is right there. Perhaps the gap has been the opportunity or the ability of creatives to articulate a return on investment. But it isn't the creative who should be articulating the return on investment. And so, especially when there's opportunity, then all of the players, including the funders, should sit with the creative and perhaps work together to figure out what the return on investment could be or what the pathways should be. So, for instance, in our space, just this month, at the end of the month, because of the lack of understanding in the space, we are doing a breakfast, a film investment breakfast, just to try and understand or create an opportunity. For instance, we are coming up, the country, Ghana, is coming up with a tax incentive for the creative space, but for the film industry, so that when you invest as a business, be it you are giving money or whether you are tech or whatever, you can get some tax waivers or benefits. And so again, in the space, there's so much technology. I mean, it's unimaginable. Again, from music, design, theater, gaming, all of these, the creation of, we use technology. If you take film, every step of the way is technology. If you take music, every step of the way is technology, from going to the studio to distributing to all of that. And money is exchanged. If I go to a studio right now and I want to go and record music, do I not pay? And so if that studio has an easier way of collecting money or, managing money, is that not fintech right there? Then if it's not, then I don't understand what fintech is. And so I struggle to understand where the gap in understanding is between the creative space and fintechs and the banking space and money generally.
KOD, Yaa Asantewaa talks about the need for other players to appreciate the return on investment within our sector, not us necessarily showcasing to them. That's another matter for discussion. But in the light of that, share with me, how has fintech assisted or augmented your delivery in your area?
Well, there are quite a number of businesses who work in this space, especially in the area of distribution for events. And Sarkodie and I work with the same companies locally. And what they do is they have platforms where people actually pay way ahead of the event. We could decide to start selling our tickets for an event like Rhythms on the Runway right from now. The event is in December, but we could decide to start selling from now because the platform exists already. So what you do is, you just go on. We give you maybe an early bird rate for now. Between now and maybe October, you're paying X amount of money, which is not the actual amount that we'll charge when the event is closer. So that is one of the reasons, the benefits of having fintech in the space of events and distribution. Now, let me get into the area of music for a bit. Now, maybe until 2000 and maybe 10, there was something that we did on radio, and even the DJ who's playing here would have what we call the log sheet. Sarkodie mentioned it. Okay. Now, the log sheet is usually presented to the head of programs at the radio station before you even go on air. So, as a music presenter, you write down all the songs you're playing, maybe in an 1 hour slot. You're playing 10 songs. You present it to your head of programs, and then it's compiled. All the different presenters during the day would present it to the head of programs, and then at the end of the month, it's presented.
All talkatives will not be admitted to Rapaholic.
And at the end of the month, it's presented to the Copyright Society. So Copyright would know if Sarkodie had the highest airplay in the month, if Shatta Wale had the least, if Stonebwoy was like next to him. So in terms of even paying them for their music on air, we always knew who was making more and who wasn't. But then at the point, they decided to scrap the log sheet system and go for flat rates. I think it's because the media organizations were actually struggling, going per the amount of money they had to pay for a song, for instance. It was quite tough for them to pay the Copyright Society. So they were given a flat amount to pay every month.
Wow.
Now, let me tell you, Jerry, I'm sure if we have a way of shutting down radio and TV stations because of what they owe our musicians, most of them won't work today. As it were, a few months ago, the GAMRO, activities are on hold. They're actually not working. So you'd wonder what happens to musicians. So musicians like Sarkodie are actually making more from working outside, being part of copyright societies outside than making money from Ghana.
Wow.
That's the narrative that we ought to change.
Okay. Chief Moomen, you have the last word for this round, after which I shall open the floor for 3 contributions from fintechs, from banks, from any other organizations here, and then we shall have our closing thoughts. The last word for today will come from the UN Resident Coordinator, who is here to bring perspective on what his organization is doing to augment this year's summit. Let me come to you, Chief Moomen.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure if you take a typical bank's lending portfolio, I mean, real estate, government treasury bills, oil and gas, and all of that. But we know that, for example, natural resources will someday finish. Our oil is not infinite. The gold, either galamsey will kill us all or it. But IP is inexhaustible. IP would continue for as long as possible. One of the smartest moves Michael Jackson made was to acquire the Beatles catalog. Now, if you go to the global world, what people are actually doing is now buying catalogs of people. So you know that Taylor Swift's albums was bought by one company, right? We know that a lot of musicians now are selling for bulk.
Chief Moomen, you are talking English. You mean catalog? What, the album?
So like the body of work.
Compilation of the works.
The body of works.
Okay.
Because they know that literally that is a money churning mechanism for as long as the digital world is solid. And now because digitalization has made content consumption easier, it has also made monetizing it easier. So people have begun to realize that IP is actually great wealth, and all around the world is becoming a business model. Now, I'm going to give a free consultancy to all the bankers here. Years ago, when we were thinking of how to fund our project and we wanted to raise big money, we wrote a memo to Fidelity Bank, and I'm happy they are here. And I went to have the first conversation with them, but I realized I wasn't too important back then to merit that kind of attention. But imagine, what is the biggest fear of banks? Risk. If we give you the money, can you pay back, right? So I told them that, how about we float some kind of a bond? It may not be a bond, but just follow me. Imagine that you floated a Sarkodie bond. Who are the biggest supporters of Sarkodie or Shatawale or Stombo? They are fanatics. They are people who believe in him. They are people who believe in his vision. And say that we're floating the Sarkodie or Shatawale or whatever bond. We want you to go and put money into it. That money would be put in a regular investment. It's going to accrue interest for you. But then we're going to use that money as some kind of a collateral to give financing to Sarkodie to produce his project. And Sarkodie has IP. You can actually ask Sarkodie to put some of his IP down as collateral and let him leverage on this, line of credit to create more content, to market more content. Because remember that in the big international, stages, as much money you invest in production, you invest in marketing. So Hollywood will put $100 million in a film and put equally $100 million, in marketing to create $1 billion products that they are looking for. This is just to access that if we really think through innovative ways and financing models, we can find systems that work for our own reality. And for me, one of the biggest things we could do is to create some kind of a financial and investment model around the celebrity, around the characters, and allow the rich to be born by their fanatics, who would easily put money in it. Small, someone can put 10 CDs here, 15, 20 CDs here, 1,000 CDs here, depending on their risk appetite. And that could give you a bulk enough amount of investment that you can, use as some kind of a collateral to finance a Sarkodie or a Shatawale. I know that would at least work for those who have built credibility and have built a record in the system. I think that if we are a bit more creative, and that's what 3i Summit is about, if we come and we regurgitate the old, information and we don't think boldly and tax ourselves to the innovative, then the purpose of the summit will not be fulfilled. And I know that DBG is very much interested in opening, opportunities like this. So I actually want to challenge, some of the young bankers here who are willing to, impress their bosses to sit down with some of the creatives. I mean, some of us are ubiquitous. You can get us anywhere. We can give you as much ideas that we have accrued with over 2 decades of practice, and you can build a financial model that is unique. Nowhere in the world is there a bond for artists, and we can say that this is something that we created out of Africa, we piloted here in Accra, and something that we can scale across, the continent and the world, and it will be a unique value proposition. We are also contributing to the global fintech, and investment system. But
Chief Moomen,
yes,
all you are trying to say is that Yetisikasu and come there. No, Sak has given me some real education on this whole, album on what do you call it? The catalog.
Yes.
Hey, so could it be that somebody could actually buy the whole of Amachidede Lumba?
Absolutely.
I just pray that nobody has started doing that.
No, not yet.
Hey, let me now go over to the floor. We shall take 3 contributions and then we'll...
Please supply them.
Thank you.
Hold on, Jerry, before you come that, unfortunately, most of our musicians have actually sold their catalogs, yes.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Why?
International
Oh, to local distributors, but they have.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for an inspirational conversation that we've just had. You've sold to me for sure. My name is Em. I work for an international organization called the Aspen Institute, and we specialize in promoting and propelling entrepreneurship in the Global South. So we have partners across 8 organizations from Brazil, Colombia, 3 in Africa, all the way to Southeast Asia. So I'm very proud to be here. We have just launched in 2024 a working group for the cultural and creative industries. It's been driven by a passion for the talent that is in West Africa, in particular, that I represent. My question to you, and also, sorry, I need to thank 3i Africa for bringing this platform to us, and thank you 3i for talking about the creative sector, because it's a forgotten sector. People always forget the entertainment sector, the creative sector, is going to be the creators of jobs and economic growth in our region. And as a believer in youth entrepreneurship, this is a sector that we need to nurture. So my question to you is, we talk a lot about policy. One of the things we want to do is bring the policy dialogue to a global platform, which is what we do. And we have an event in Abidjan later on in the year, but we have 3i first. How can we bring very important conversations around policy across West Africa? It's not just about Ghana. We have Nigeria, we have Senegal, we have Cote d'Ivoire. We have very important creative economies around us. How do we bring policy dialogue to the global stages? And what is your role in terms of bringing those policy dialogues to the global stages? That's my question. Thank you.
And that falls directly to Yaa Asantewaa. We'll answer that shortly. Curtis represents all the fintechs.
No, thank you very much. My main thing is, it was very interesting listening to the panel. I thought there are some key problems being shared. What's interesting for us is that we don't know about them at all. We don't hear about them. And even though you're here, I think there hasn't been enough of an overlap between us and yourselves as creators, because everyone thinks of you as creators, and they think of us as technology. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to actually engage. We solve a lot of tough problems, and we would love to engage to even figure out how we can do better going forward. It was interesting listening to Sarkodie on things like Apple Music's platform, and I know Jerry asked the question about what the ratios look like, and I liked your response in that you said, right now you're not even there yet. So it's more about how do we get to the point where we can actually figure out how to get our creators access to funds. We collect money all the time. How do we make it possible to collect money for yourselves as creators? And I think we are up to that challenge. The one thing I would say is, even though it's Ghana, this is not a problem we think of as Ghana only. It has to be an Africa-wide problem. And maybe it's not just Ghanaian fintechs that are engaged, but we are talking to a bunch of fintechs across other very large markets to figure out, okay, how do we work together to really solve this? Because if we do this well, you're going to find those global players actually look to come and acquire these kind of solutions. And in the end, it will offer more value for the creators in the market.
Lovely. We shall take a final one. Mr. Kwame Opong, this whole thing about fintech and innovation really falls to you at the Bank of Ghana. You happen to be the director, the first director of this department which has been set up. Please, what say you to all the discussions thus far?
Well, thank you very much. So I was standing behind there having a conversation with some of the fintechs, and I think for us, there's one fundamental thing, which is the fact that we have very little understanding of what you do as an industry. And from my personal perspective as a policymaker, what I see, particularly going back to that meeting we had with Stellar Network, my interaction with Stellar really was on the basis of the fact that they were a blockchain provider. And as a fintech director, that's an area of interest for me. But as he began, and Idris Elba began to walk us through what is really happening, the potential we're missing, I think the creative space should be looked at and given as much priority as all the other segments of our economy. It's the one area where we seem to have incredible potential, and if we can really achieve our transformational goals, I think you play a key role. And from a fintech innovation standpoint, I'm glad to hear the conversation that is already taking place here today, including even the question that Curtis is asking and the comments that is following, that we perhaps, this begins a broader conversation on how we as policymakers can address some of these challenges, and fintechs and the private sector can be enabled to help you achieve your goals. And maybe what I would ask of you as key players in this industry is that you hold leadership accountable. Don't let this be conversations. Nice conversations we have in nice rooms and never do anything about. Let there be actual concrete steps. Because from the FinTech standpoint, this 3i Summit is intended to achieve concrete steps. Get the leadership from across the continent to agree to concrete actions, and you should hold us to do the same as well. So we count on you to hold all of us accountable and to really make some progress here. There's incredible potential, and we're happy to partner in any way that we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for all our contributors. Talk of action, and there's a woman who makes that possible, Madame Yaa Asantewaa. The question from our dear sister falls to you. How do we translate all of this into action? Do we have to wait for another Idris Elba?
No, and I wonder why we had to wait for him to come and say this, because we've been saying this forever. And I just want to take the opportunity and say I hear what my brother from the Bank of Ghana said. But I think the responsibility is both ways, you know. In as much as we've been speaking, I think the onus is on the banking space, money spaces, fintechs, that entire space to also step forward. Because my personal experience, for instance, is, you know, I saved at a bank for over 15 years. And when I went wanting some loan, I was still told that, you know, and my bank, you know, my account run really nicely. And yet, when I went to the bank, they said I had an intangible product. You know, I had contracts and all of that. And still, that bank doesn't understand what I do. So where is that responsibility? And so, yes, we would hold a leadership to accountability, but leadership also has a responsibility, especially when this is a space with so much money, you know, floating around, especially when this is a space that employs the largest, especially when this is a space that is so soft with the movement of money. And that's where I connected, Madam, to the question that you asked, because for me, this is all about return on investment. Whether it's a policymaker, government, or whether it's business, or whether it's a creative, it's all about return on investment. And so perhaps when we situate the conversation right, so if I'm speaking to a government person, perhaps how will I couch my return on investment? Perhaps I will highlight the fact that this creates jobs and that there are so many young people looking for, you know, and the barriers to entry in this sector is lowest, and actually this sector creates the highest jobs around. That immediately is return on investment for that policymaker. And when it's situated like that and you invite them to an event like this perhaps, or an event where the conversation happens, then, you know, they find a reason to come. And so, for instance, I always said to my colleagues, I said, look, the fact that you're holding money, you know, there's a saying that the hunter will always be the champion if the lion doesn't tell its story. You know, and so you're holding money, but we have to learn to speak the investment language. And so that's a major gap. And I think we are training ourselves better, you know, and all of those. So to your question, again, let me reiterate the return on investment. Between us, there's real money, so there's real return on investment. This is one of the sectors that brings the highest payback. I don't know, I mean, sometimes, for instance, you hear about a film that is released and in weeks it's made millions at the box office or where. I don't know which other sector can bring you that quick of money, you know, return. If, for instance, I did a product, and music is like that, but I'll talk about film. The usual time span for making money on your product is over 15 years. And so, for instance, I still watch, what is one of my best films, Pretty Woman. Pretty Woman is still making money, making a lot of money. You know, Amachi Dede is still making money. That's why he sold his catalog. If there was no value, then he would not sell. There would be no value to it, you know. So it's about saying that there is money here. And so but then to be able to track the flow of money, because sometimes there's also confusion in that space. And that's where I say also invest in the spaces where you can track the money. If you don't invest in the spaces where you can track the money and you sit somewhere and you think that there's no return on investment, you are doing us a disservice, but you are also denying yourself the opportunity to make money. And for the policymaker, again, is the same conversation. How do we couch this so that the policymaker understands that this also, or this is how my return on investment looks? And I think when we begin to couch those things in those spaces, and also let me say this.
In a minute.
Fund the businesses that support the creative space, because that's the only way you would see the money. And there's so many supportive businesses in this space beyond the creative themselves that is creating the product. Thank you.
Overall, while creative arts and fintech may operate in two different spheres, they have the potential to collaborate and mutually benefit each other by fostering innovation, improving financial access to resources, and enhancing the sustainability of the entire creative economy. KOD, in a minute, what are your concluding thoughts? Just in 1 minute.
This platform, for me, is an eye-opener. I'm also very happy that you've thought of the creative space. I mean, globally, the orange economy is way ahead of most of the other sectors. But in this space, it's kind of relegated. We're happy that you've actually woken up now. And let's look at how we can all collaborate and, get our story told like other countries are doing. There's so much potential in Ghana, and people look up to us. But in terms of evolving and elevating ourselves from where we are to the next level, we always, run short. And really, typically, someone would ask, like, why are musicians not doing as well as the others, maybe from Nigeria or South Africa? Essentially, it's a financial situation. That's what it is. There.
All right. Chief Moomen.
Yes, I just want to say that our appetite for return must match with our capacity to withhold losses. The business model of every bank is that some loans will go bad, right? So in scrutinizing proposals and business arrangement for the creative industry, your scrutiny must not be ironclad and even more than the traditional sectors that you lend to. You must be able to give us that capacity to, in quotes, fail as a way of improving the industry, because some of the loans will go bad, and we should make peace with that. But some would succeed, and the great thing about the creative industry is that a product that can succeed so phenomenally that it can overcome all the losses. And she talked about the strategy that Afrexim Bank is using about acquiring a portfolio of content, because they say that, yes, they may be able to take losses on some of the content, but they are very sure that some of the content would also succeed in a way as to cover those losses. So in scrutinizing, don't expect us to be even more perfect than the traditional industries that you've been lending and investing, for centuries. You must have some bit of a capacity, some bit of a blind faith. That is the only way we can leapfrog our industry and create the unicorns that will make this industry, very good, and it will have greater impact for all of us. Thank you.
King Zach, you have the last word.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been to end, if this is supposed to be an advice, but that on the corporate side, the fintech, I think you guys should push people in your sector that's very creative. Because that's the era we are getting in. Creativity will win in this era that we are going. So the usual ways you guys will operate will make it difficult to deal with creative people. But then when you have creative people working with you as well, because what happened between me and Standard Chartered came from a creative person that was working in Standard Chartered, who they thought was crazy because she thought about something that is unimaginable. A bank that's solid, very corporate, working with Sarkodie, it doesn't even make sense. But then she thought about this. She convinced me because she can speak my language and she can speak your language. So made that thing happen. And what we did is we made history in Ghana. It was never done. This is the first time we saw Sarkodie, or not Sarkodie, as an artist and a banking a brand, And now we had the most successful online banking app to date. Nobody's been able to, beat it.
Is that when you started wearing the suit and
exactly.
the cigars? You still had to align, huh?
Yes, and it's been the best out here in Ghana. Nobody has been able to beat it, and till date it's number one. They've won a lot of awards, and it's because these two people, these crazy people you guys thought was just crazy, but came up with something so innovative, then that's the word that's really standing out here. So I think moving from here, what you guys should go with is be innovative and allow the creative people in your office to really think loud and be able to create some magic. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kofi Okyere Darko, Chief Moomen, Madam Juliet Nana Yaa Asantewaa, and the king himself, King Sack.